But importantly, it was used by Nelson. It was his first ever command as a captain of a warship. And he was at home in Norfolk, having been laid off, and he was waiting for his first command, and he was given Agamemnon. And so he then spent 3.5 years honing his skills as a captain, and that's where he really learnt about tactics, the command of the seas, of men. He unfortunately at that time lost the sight of his eye when he was on Agamemnon, but it's also the ship where he met Emma Hamilton when they sailed into Naples. So Agamemnon was always known as his favourite, Nelson's favourite. And he spoke of her throughout his life in his letters as being his favourite ship. And so we're very proud of the fact that that is a ship from Buckler's Heart.
Welcome to the Sailing Podcast with me, Theo Stocker. This is the podcast where we talk to people involved in the world of sailing who are passionate about sailing, passionate about the boats that we sail on, and the sea in general and everything that floats on it. And today I'm in Buckler's Heart, and I'm very lucky to have with me Mary Montagu Scott. Now, Mary, you are... It seems like you're involved in lots and lots of different organisations. You're a director of Beaulieu Enterprises.
That's right. So Beaulieu Enterprises is the trading company of the Beaulieu estate, where Buckler's Heart and the Beaulieu River rests, and it's owned by my brother, who's the current Lord Montagu. So I've been brought up here all my life in this incredibly beautiful place on the Beaulieu River. And really from a very, very early age, I just was drawn to the sea and to the river. We have a lovely beach house that overlooks the Solent shore across to Newtown Creek on this side, where I used to spend my summer holidays when we used to escape from the crazy life of the Motor Museum at Beaulieu. I also spent a lot of my childhood just messing about in little dinghies and fishing for eels on the river, just being on the water, and I was drawn to it at a very, very early age, and particularly drawn to Buckler's Heart and wooden ships and sailing and anything to do with the sea. So I've really had this passion for a very long time, and I've taken that through my life, and that interest developed it, particularly with the Maritime Museum here, which I've refurbished significantly, developed the Shipwrights Workshop here, become involved with lots of other maritime organisations as a board member, so the National Museum of the Royal Navy and HMS Victory, the Maritime Archaeology Trust, which is great because I get to go diving on wrecks.
We're going to talk about that in a little bit, aren't we? Because you,
that's right. And was involved with the IBTC for a while in Portsmouth. So
that's the
boat building school, training school that unfortunately then folded. But I've had quite a long history with dealing with maritime, and that really just stems from a complete love and obsession with everything maritime, and particularly my interest in the age of sail of the 18th century, where Buckler's Heart ships came from, and trying to celebrate that, trying to keep that alive. And
I can imagine growing up around here. I mean, it's absolutely stunning, and we were saying the fact that actually people live in these cottages. It's still a living village. It's obviously sort of a huge historical interest, but there's a working marina down at the bottom of the hill there. And we're going to talk about the slipways in a minute that are at the bottom of the hill, where they've built ships for centuries there, haven't they? Possibly almost a millennia or more, maybe. Yes, and we were just chatting a moment ago about sailing generally. Obviously, can you remember what your first sailing boat was?
So I actually nagged my father to give me a boat when I turned 6, and it was a little plastic rowing boat, and I think he thought that was quite safe, and I got that on the river literally when I was 6, and then I went into doing dinghy sailing. As all children did at that time. I learnt then on the Lymington River in mirror dinghies. And then I got a laser. I was also a very keen windsurfer for a long time, did a lot of windsurfing. And now I'm very active as Commodore of the Beaulieu River Sailing Club, where we have a big scow fleet. And was involved with the training for years, and I'm a very passionate and keen sailor.
Yeah. And you own a Cornish crabber 26?
And I own a Cornish crabber 26, which I absolutely love. And I keep it here in Beaulieu, on the Beaulieu River. But at the moment it's in Holland, because I've been sailing over there this last year and a half. But my happy place is being on a sailing boat, full stop. I've done lots of tall ship sailing. I've been, very privileged to sail on lots of great boats in my life, and absolutely love it.
Yeah, wonderful. So we're here partly today to talk about the Bucklers Hard Shipyard Trust.
Yes, so this is a new charity that has been formed this year, and it's all about trying to create an educational charity to enable us to keep the skills of shipbuilding, wooden shipbuilding, alive, to celebrate and preserve and conserve those skills and the knowledge around it, the archives to study the history of Bucklers Hard and wooden shipbuilding, because it has this very famous shipbuilding history as a village, quite remarkably built 55 ships for the Royal Navy between the 1740s and 1815, and so
it's quite a high output, isn't it? Because they're big ships.
They're big ships. Yeah. I mean, the biggest was a 74-gun ship, and actually it was the biggest yard on the whole of the south coast in terms of output for the Royal Navy.
Wow!
So, and it's this tiny village in the middle of nowhere.
Yes, if we were literally, we're sitting at the top end of one line of cottages, and there's another line of cottages opposite. And that's it, isn't it? And
that is it. So it was a remarkable part of history, and that's why we are now doing an archaeological dig to try and learn a lot more about that history. Because those slipways have been used probably since the time of medieval times, certainly. And we've got layers and layers of boat building and shipbuilding, particularly through that 18th century, very, very intense time, but also until the Second World War, when the whole river and village was requisitioned. And then it actually was used as a modern boatyard until the 1970s. So we have got layer and layer, and it's going to be so.
And there is still a boatyard here, isn't there? It's just moved over to where the marina is.
It's moved a few hundred metres upstream, which has now preserved this historic slipways. And so that's now what we're excavating, to try and learn about the history of those slipways.
And what's the earliest evidence that there's been shipbuilding on this particular site? Obviously there's been shipbuilding sort of with oak from the New Forest, but...
That's right, and oak from the whole Beaulieu estate around it. So we know that the first big ship for the Navy was built in 1698, and that's the HMS Salisbury, that was definitely built on the Beaulieu River. Prior to that, there may well have been boat building, and we know from an early map that there was a building here on this corner of the river, and it's known as Buckles Hard.
Buckles Hard.
Mr. Buckle was a boat builder, so we know there was a boatyard here, and it's likely there would have been a boatyard going right back into medieval times, because this is the perfect place on the river to have a boatyard, because it doesn't dry out when the tide goes out, and it also has this lovely hard.
But it's a natural hard where the rest of the river is mud banks and salt marshes.
Correct. And it's also very sheltered from the southwesterly winds, so it is the perfect place.
I've sailed in here a few times, and the shelter is much appreciated.
You get in and then it's sheltered.
Yeah, exactly.
So we know that that is the case. We also have a lot of records about the building of those ships, which really intensified from the 1740s onwards. And then it became a very big industrial site, building these ships for the Navy.
And so that move from sort of a small boatyard, I mean, so you were saying that the original hard was probably used for landing some of the stone that went into Beaulieu Abbey. And that was a sort of a good landing place to bring the stone in. And where did the stone came from? All over the place?
It came from France, from Caen at the Isle of Wight, and in Portland. So it's incredible. In 1204, they brought all that stone up the river to build an enormous abbey here in Beaulieu.
It's a huge infrastructure project.
It's mind-blowing, actually. And so there will be evidence somewhere, deep, deep down, perhaps even of those medieval quays. They've been overlaid so many times, I think it's unlikely we're going to find much, but if we start to find any stone structures, that would be the Holy Grail. There certainly is a stone quay at Beaulieu, which, if you've ever driven through Beaulieu village, it's actually embedded in the mud, and you can't see it, it's there, but it's the original medieval quay is actually in the riverbed.
Wow.
So we might find something here.
Maybe you'll have to excavate that one day.
Well, maybe. Another thing.
I was interested that in the 1740s, there was a sudden sort of increase in shipbuilding activity here. what was it that drove that?
So what drove it was the Navy's requirement to really expand the fleet at that time through war. And they couldn't build enough ships. And so they started to put tenders out to private yards. And Buckler's Hard had already built one ship in 1698. They knew it was a good site for shipbuilding. And they put out a contract to a shipbuilder to build here. And then a Navy surveyor came from Deptford, Mr. Henry Adams, as a supervisor. He then took on the lease of the shipyard, and he was the man who then continued to build ships right through until the 19th century. And he was the great master shipwright who oversaw the yard.
So that's the period that covers the Napoleonic Wars.
Correct.
Largely.
Absolutely. The American Wars, the French Revolutionary Wars, Napoleonic Wars, and when there was this very intense shipbuilding requirement. And building up to 74-gun ships, which were really big ships. The largest, the Spencer, which was launched in 1800, was a huge ship. I mean,
what sort of size are we talking here?
So you're looking at a keel of 160 feet long, upper deck of 181 feet. So it's, getting not big as a Victory, but you're getting, in terms of size.
Yeah, and when you see the river here, it's not a huge river, is it? It's relatively narrow, and we're on a tight bend in the river as well.
That's right. So when they had to launch the Spencer, they had to dredge the river. We've actually got a drawing which actually shows how much they had to dredge the river to deepen it in order to launch the HMS Spencer. And that's a very rare drawing because it shows us the tidal height of a time in place in 1800, which is a very rare thing to have. So when we're trying to run a modern river today, we actually know exactly what it was 225 years ago.
So you can see the differences in sea level,
widths, depths. So there's no doubt that probably in those 220 years we calculate around 0.5 metre of sea level rise, certainly a lot of environmental change.
Yeah. Sorry about that, we just had some slight camera issues. Hopefully we've got those all sorted. But I think we were just talking about the increase in shipbuilding and what it was that was driving it and all the different wars. And we were just talking about the slipways then, weren't we? So, what are the different slipways on the river?
Obviously when you were building ships and they extended the slipways, so there then were 5 slipways and a quay, you would have at any one time been building, let's say, a 64-gun ship, but alongside you might have had a 24-gun ship, or even the cutters being built, because you want to use the offcuts from the large ships to then make sure you're using all that timber and to keep the labour force really busy. You want to be able to keep the skilled workers. Yeah,
you don't want people having downtime, because that's just costing you money then,
exactly. So it would have been a really busy yard with these 5 different slips. Another thing to bear in mind is that when they built the very large ships, the 64 and 74-gun ships, when they launched them in the river, they were launched without their masts, with their armament. They weren't fitted out for going to war. They were then launched and towed to Portsmouth to the Royal Dockyard. It took about 5 days to tow them round on the tide. They then got fitted out with all armament and...
Because they wouldn't have had tugboats, would they? So
no, you would have had rowing gigs.
Literally rowed round and with the
tide. And then they were fitted out there. The whole hull would then sink in the weight of the armament by around 4 to 5 feet of depth.
4 or 5 feet, wow.
So they could never get back into the Beaulieu River, because once that depth, they couldn't get them up the river. They couldn't get them over the bar.
It's quite a shallow bar, isn't it? Even in a small yacht, you have to watch that at low tide.
And there isn't a dry dock here. So that's why you could never get the ships in. So it wasn't a repair yard, it was a boat building yard and a repair yard for much smaller vessels. They could, of course, bring in the lighter drafts, the shallower draft vessels, and they could have brought them with capstans up on the high tide to mend them and repair them, but the large warships never came back into the river again. So the slipways were working slips for really principally boat building, wooden shipbuilding really, and small boats. Primarily.
Presumably, if you were building a ship like that, that's fairly serious amounts of timber.
Huge.
I mean, that's where I guess the Beaulieu estate and the New Forest more widely comes into it.
That's right. So Interestingly, the Beaulieu estate is actually in the middle of the New Forest Crown lands, and all the timber that is in the New Forest itself is owned by the Crown. So it went to the Royal Dockyards. So it wouldn't actually have come to Buckler's Hard. But the Beaulieu estate then had probably around 2,500 acres of woodlands itself.
Yep.
And they also then bought from the other private estates around the area. And they also brought timber in from all over the world. And I mean, from Shropshire, from Wales, all over.
Sorry, there's visitors outside, so if you can hear a dog going nuts,
that's the neighbours.
There we go, yeah.
So actually the timber shortages towards the end of that 18th century were really acute and actually caused a lot of problems for all the shipbuilding industry at that
because
time.
So many ships had been built.
Yes, there was just such demand for it, and all the big trees had been cut down. They're going to have to bring the timber from further and further away. So the timber supply story is a very interesting one as well.
Yeah. And what sort of, I mean, just sort of thinking, we're going to talk a little bit about the keel that you're going to lay again on one of the slipways. What sort of scale of timber are you looking at? How wide is a keel for a 164-foot long keel?
The keel is around 18 inches by 14 inches, it can be, it varies, because you stitch on the keelson and the false keel and it all bolts together and you get this massive keel piece.
Yeah.
But they are really big bits, and say the keel of the Agamemnon, which is 131 foot 6 inches, which is 40 metres, give or take. How many pieces? That's 8 metres, 5 sections with huge scarf joints.
Yes.
And to find trees which are 8 metres long, with totally straight, without any imperfections, that you can then do a really clean scarf joint, that's a really hard thing to find today in a single piece of solid oak. Or elm, because elm is actually what they used for the keels. And of course now we can't get elm, there is no elm. But in those days, the Beaulieu estate had some big elm woods and they would have used the elm for the keels. Okay,
and presumably that gave them a nice long straight grain.
It did, and it also was much more water resistant and rot resistant. That's why they used elm.
Yeah, because oak's got quite a sort of open grain, doesn't it, in many ways?
Indeed. And from the moment they started building them in the open here, they started to rot. That was the biggest problem for the Navy, was that the ships literally rotted away as soon as you got them launched.
And we were talking a little bit about what led to the end of this sort of shipbuilding boom, and that's partly just a change in technology, really, of the materials. It's a
combination of war and peace.
Yes.
Of course, you have at the end, you have Trafalgar, then you have Waterloo, and you have peace with our mortal enemies at that time. And the focus then starts to turn to the new technologies of iron and then steam. So the wooden shipbuilding seems very old-fashioned at that time.
Yes.
By the time you get into the 1830s,
because they started launching the ironclads.
You started to get iron pieces even even earlier, in 1820, they were starting to put iron strappings into wooden ships, and that accelerated into iron plate, and then, of course, you start to have whole iron ships.
Yes.
And there's an interesting interim where they have iron and wood together, with lots of technical challenges.
Yes.
So that's why yards like this then just went into decline. You didn't have that industrial heartland that you needed, the steel, the ironworks, and you also were at peace. They weren't building so many ships.
Yeah. And so just to come back to one particular ship that's a little bit of a favourite of yours, and was also a favourite of Lord Horatio Nelson.
That is right.
The HMS Agamemnon.
Correct.
Can you tell us a little bit about that ship?
So HMS Agamemnon is a 64-gun Ardent class third-rate ship. It was launched here in April 1781. It took 3 years to build. About 2,000 oak trees went into her.
2,000 oak trees.
Yeah. There were 7 built of her class over a slightly over 20-year period.
Were those all built here?
No, actually, there were 3 64s built here.
Yeah.
But the Agamemnon is particularly notable because it had a very famous service history, which lasted for 28 years, which is remarkable for a ship of that time, because the Navy, when they built ships, really didn't think they were going to last more than about 10 years due to rot, battle, wear and tear. So a ship to last 28 years is really very good. But importantly, it was used by Nelson. It was his first ever command as a captain of a warship. And he was at home in Norfolk, having been laid off, and he was waiting for his first command, and he was given Agamemnon. And so he then spent 3.5 years honing his skills as a captain. And that's where he really learnt about tactics, the command of the seas, of men. He unfortunately at that time lost the sight of his eye when he was on Agamemnon. But it's also the ship where he met Emma Hamilton when they sailed into Naples. So Agamemnon was always known as his favourite, Nelson's favourite. And he spoke of her throughout his life in his letters as being his favourite ship. And so we're very proud of the fact that that is a ship from Buckler's Heart.
I think he liked particularly that it was quite fast.
It was fast, it was agile.
Yeah.
So he said, sailed very well, a good roader. So, all these things added to his love of the ship. And of course, it's where he spent that critical time when he was a young captain. So, that was very formative for him at that time.
Yes.
So that makes it very significant. And it was at the battle. Agamemnon then went on to many famous battles all over the world, had this incredible service history. Obviously at the Battle of Trafalgar, Battle of Copenhagen, Battle of Santo Domingo, all these different battles.
A sort of roll call
of battles.
Important battles.
Ends up in a South American squadron in 1808, 1809, and sadly she sinks off the coast of Uruguay in a place called Maldonado Bay, of what is now known as Punta del Este, where in fact there's a famous yacht club today.
Yes, yeah, very famous.
And she goes with a squadron of ships and she hits a shoal. And unfortunately, she's so badly damaged and sinking at that time, her whole hull is leaking. The anchor pierced through on the starboard side. She lists over onto the shoal and she sinks, and they cannot keep the pumps up. They decide to abandon her after 24 hours of trying to keep the pumps running, and then they abandon ship. And she's left to sink there into the mud and lost into history.
And I think is a reflection of how tired these boats got so quickly that normally a captain who lost his ship or went aground would lose his command or lose his...
Well, he was court-martialed.
Yeah.
He was court-martialed, but he wasn't blamed for the loss of the ship.
Yeah.
And it was due to the incorrectness of the charts.
Okay.
Because, of course, there were so few charts of South America at that time. They said it really wasn't his fault. It certainly wasn't his fault that the ship was leaking like a sieve. It had iron strappings to try and hold it together. And it's thought that it wouldn't have made it back to the UK if it had sailed back.
Yeah. And so what's your relationship with the Agamemnon?
So now I have had the huge honour of doing a project in the last few years to go and survey that wreck. It's taken a long time to get the permissions with the Uruguayan authorities, but last year we managed to secure those permissions, and I went with a team of maritime archaeologists led by the University of Southampton, the Maritime Archaeology Trust, and Bournemouth University. Took a team of people working with some partners in Uruguay, and we actually went and dived on the wreck and did the first ever photogrammetric surveys of the wreck. We now have a really good understanding of, well, what we found so far of the wreck, which is the whole starboard side laid flat. And I'm hoping to go back next November, December to do a second phase of diving to investigate the wreck further and learn what we can from that wreck. We're not going to lift it, we're not going to take anything. It's actually...
It's not in brilliant condition, is it? It's in lots of pieces.
Well, the whole starboard side is actually laid flat. It's intact, with the keel showing at one point, but it is, it's broken up. It's over 200 years it's being on the seabed. And at the time it was salvaged by the Navy, so the upper masts and decks and guns were taken off. So we're not expecting to find a lot of finds, but there's still a lot of ship there. And of course, it's a very important ship for British history. It's particularly important for me because it's the only easy to reach ship of a Buckler's ship in the world. There are lots of wrecks of Buckler's ships across the world. Amazing how I've mapped them. But this is one that actually you can dive on if you get the permissions. It's only in 10 metres of water. So that means I could go
fairly
and dive.
muddy water though for the
fairly
River Plate.
Muddy, and River Plate's not great for diving. And so we can learn a lot about that. And so I'm really excited about going out for the second time and really studying a lot of the things about the construction, the things we can learn.
And I think you said you're excavating one of the slipways at the moment.
So that's right. So that's part of the wider project. Yeah. So we're excavating the main slipway where they built these ships in order to learn a lot more about the construction of that slipway. It's never been excavated before. We're finding lots of evidence of layers and layers of shipbuilding.
Yeah, because you've got the sort of Second World War rails on top.
You've got 1970s boat building. Yeah. You've got Second World War. You have got then boatyard of the 19th century. You've then the shipyard of the 17th century, and then right back to maybe even medieval. So we've got lots of layers, lots of finds coming out of that. We're going back down to the original line, and all the timbers are still there of the slipway, which is really exciting. And we're going to use that to inform laying, I hope, the keel of the Agamemnon again in the same slipway, but up the hill a bit, because we can't lay it where it originally was laid, because that now extends too far out into the river. Yeah. So we're looking to lay a replica keel of full size of the Agamemnon based on the data from the wreck. Yeah, so you can go to the wreck, measure it, look at the wreck, we can measure it, we can look at the fastenings, what type of joints it had, what type of timber it is, and then the dream is to lay that keel, a replica keel here in the original slipway again, and a bit more. So if funding allows, I want to be able to actually put the stem and the stern, actually put some of the timbers of the floors in, and maybe 3 frames full size, so that you'll get visitors will then come to Bucklershard and really see the scale of the shipbuilding. Because it'll dwarf some of these cottages. Yeah. So we're not going to build a ship, but it's like a piece of sculpture. And it will inform and really make people understand the scale of the shipbuilding that they did. And in doing that, we're going to keep the skills alive. So we've got to learn about timber production, all the things that are required in order to actually build on that scale. And just before I want to pick up on that, but in terms of the excavation you're doing now, we had a quick look, and there's pottery, there's bottles, some bones, I don't know what they're from, but there's lots of fastenings, sort of iron or bronze or copper fastenings. Correct. So, I mean, obviously the fastenings is very interesting, because we'll be able to, I hope when I go out, compare the fastenings on the actual wreck with some of the fastenings we're finding in the slipway today. And you've also got the forge where they were forged just up the road at Sailing. That's right. So there were 2 forges on site here, and 2 iron blacksmithing forges, because 100 tons of wrought iron fittings went into the Agamemnon. Wow. Yeah. 100 tons. 7 to 8 tons of copper. The copper plating was done in the dockyard when it came into dry dock, but that's the extra weight that goes on. Huge amounts of weight. Yeah, they're not light. No, not light. And as for the 64 guns, 2 tons each or whatever. Anyway, so you've got. I'm very interested in the forging, so learning about that, and the ballast blocks that were cast, that were fitted in to the hull of the ship for ballast. So about 70 tons of ballast, which we can see in the wreck really clearly, the ballast blocks. Yeah. I'm interested to try and learn more about those. It's a bit niche, my interest in ballast blocks, but I'd like to see, is there a maker stamp? Because they did often have maker stamps into the ballast blocks of ships of that time. And then who's made them and where they came from. Maybe they were made here. That's what I want to see, if I can prove that. And also any evidence we can get from the timber, maybe, from the fastenings, things that we can learn about the construction of the ship. Yeah. It'd be absolutely fascinating. Amazing. And then in terms of the skills that you want to keep alive, I think that's another passion of yours, that you want to learn. You were saying about the timber production and how you do it. This keel obviously isn't going to become a real ship. And you're not starting a boat building school. No. But you want to I want to be able to pass on have a place where people can come and see it, can learn about it, very much more, not like a full-time school, but we would be able to run courses and summer schools around ship and boat building about those particular skills. So the woodworking skills. So the woodworking, the caulking, the ironwork, all those things that go into shipbuilding. Which will be, and sail making and cordage and other things. So these traditional skills that we can maybe run some courses here. Also look to build some of the yard infrastructure. So building some capstans, crab capstans,
Yeah.
some wooden cranes, the sort of technologies that they used that we can put in place here and demonstrate to the public, which I think will be really interesting, because there's nowhere really that you can see that at the moment.
No.
And they're quite simple bits of infrastructure we can build. We can have a summer school, come and build a crane, a wood crane, for instance, or come and build, so a crab capstan, and then let's have competitions pulling capstans, those sort of things. So, small bits of yard infrastructure.
And there's a bit of a network nationally, I think, between lots of people working on historic vessels, traditional vessels, that lots of these skills would be shared, and it actually means that we can preserve our historic vessels.
That's very much the case, and so feeding into the National Historic Ships and the work that they do to keep these skills alive with the ship shape network. So very much so. We've actually got 2 wooden boat builders working at the yard at Buckler's Hard. So there are, of course, as you know, many wooden boat builders out there, but not many of them have worked on this scale before.
Yeah,
and the shipwrights over working on HMS Victory currently on the restoration are all fascinated to, of course, come and see what
it's rather different
here.
building a 40-foot wooden yacht to a 180-foot wooden ship.
It's a bit less than that. But Agamemnon's 160 on the upper deck, 131 feet on the keel, but it's still really big.
Yeah, that's... Yeah.
But yes, you're dealing with much larger timber sizes. But because I'm not actually going to build a whole ship and launch it, I can be a lot more flexible about the type of wood I might choose to use. Mm-hmm. And because I'm not launching it, I can have splits in the wood. I can have wood that's not grade A. It can just have a little bit of a twist in it, because it's only going to be like a sculpture.
Okay, yeah. So if people are listening or watching and they go, wow, I'd love to learn how to build an 18th century ship.
Yeah, come and see what we're doing.
Yeah, or like the sound of what you're doing with the Buckler's Hard Shipyard Trust. How can people get involved with that? So
the best thing is, first off, we've got a Facebook page, we've got an Instagram feed, we've got a website. Come to visit Buckler's Hard. We've got an office here. We're looking for all sorts of people to get involved with this project, My Mad project. So there's everything to do with the work of the charity here. So that's boat builders, people who have skills around carpentry in particular and boat building, model making. I've got all these models, naval architects, engineers.
We've got, this is Agamemnon behind us.
It's not actually. It's actually Swiftsure. It was a 74, but there's all sorts of other models here. But we're always looking for people to come and help. If you've got old tools maybe and you'd like to donate them, if you want to come and help with, demonstrating sail or rope work or timber work, or come and get involved with the designing of this project. Of course, with any charity, you want people to do fundraising and IT and all that boring stuff. But if you're interested, come and find us. Yeah, amazing. Well, we're nearly finished. But then just a little personal question at the end about your sailing, just to bring it back to sailing. If there was one place that you've sailed in the world or in the country or on the river, wherever it is, that you think, not that you don't want crowds to go there, but that's sort of really special for you, that you would say, that's the place to sail. If you sail to one place in your lifetime, that's it. Where would you say? It's really difficult, because my favourite place is here on the Beaulieu River. Yeah. And actually sailing in as small a boat as possible, like a little gaff-rigged scow, sailing through the creeks on the Beaulieu River is about as good as it can ever get anywhere in the world, because it's so beautiful here and it's so tranquil. Yeah. With all the nature that there is here, the wildness. It's just absolutely make my heart sing when I'm on my scow sailing in the summer through the creeks at the entrance of the Beaulieu River. It's lovely. So beautiful. Or sailing the whole length of the river right to the top through the trees and the woods as you go right up to Beaulieu. It's a beautiful nature reserve all the way up, isn't it? And it's just the whole way up is so charming to sail up. So really, I don't think there's anywhere in the whole world that's as beautiful as the Beaulieu River, to be honest. Although it might be more adventurous to sail across the oceans, and of course I love to do that too, my heart is here at home on the Beaulieu River. There we go. You've heard it here first. Sail to Beaulieu. Visit Buckler's Hard. Wonderful. Well, Mary, thank you so much for sharing the story of Buckler's Hard and of Agamemnon and all of the plans you've got here. I hope it all comes together, and I'll maybe come back in a few weeks and see what else you've... Come and visit. I'm sure we'll find you a berth on the marina. Yes. And I'll show you around the museum. Lovely. We'd love to do that.